Hello, and welcome to week 2, the dynamics of spiritual formation. In this week, we are going to delve deeper into how the process, into the goals of spiritual formation, spiritual growth. What's the overarching purpose or purposes? What are we moving towards in spiritual formation, and the process? How does this process happen? We'll be looking. You'll be delving into a little passage 2 Peter rather, chapter 1, which a good number of people I've been reading and listening to really point to as perhaps the key passage in the New Testament talking about spiritual growth. There's a good number of others, there's lots of others, and you can think of others probably fairly quickly. But that's one we'll spend some time thinking about, and then move on to reading this book, a chapter from this book, one of the early chapters, Called to be Saints. What Smith in this book is trying to, most of the book's about what are the things that, if spiritual formation happens, will be happening in our life, will be seen in our lives. And he talks about 4 things: wisdom, love, good work, and joy. And those are the kind of key chapters of the book. But before that, he talks about the process. How do these things happen? All out of union with Christ. He's got this great, if I can find it rather, he says, the essence of spiritual formation is this, precisely this: fostering the capacity, the orientation, the discipline of living in union with Christ. When I read this chapter earlier this year, it was like my heart sang. Yes, this is what it's about. He says that a whole lot of things it isn't really about, or isn't centrally about, but the process of spiritual formation is about growing in. We are already united with Christ, but appropriating this union and living according to this union with Christ that we've been given. Extraordinary. And then this book here, we'll be looking at this a lot more, Sacred Companions, David Benner's book, later in the second half of the course, second half of the unit. But he has a nice early chapter on the transformational journey, and again talks about some of the goals of spiritual formation and the process. And one of the things I really like in this chapter is he's talking about becoming whole and holy. Jesus didn't die so that some part of me would be saved. He died so that my whole being I'd be made anew. Anyway, there's lots more in there. That's just the bit that I really like, but there are lots of other bits as well. Then you'll be watching Dallas Willard. He's not a fast core talker, Dallas Willard. I think he might be with the Lord now, but he has a nice little explanation of how spiritual formation happens, what's needed: a vision, intention, and means. Yes, there are things that we can do to help this process happen, despite the fact that it's utterly reliant on God's Spirit to do that work in us. Right. And then I haven't got a copy of this book, amazingly. I can't find it anywhere in my library. Evelyn and I wrote a book called Training Missionaries a few years ago, and we had 4 kind of core principles, and the first of those was that missionaries need to be people who experience God, who are experiencing God. And so we've talked about some qualities involved in experiencing God. And finally, a bit of a treat, is listening for 10 minutes or so to a good friend of mine, who served until recently in the Middle East. He was held in captivity, kidnapped and held in captivity for 7.5 months, I think. And how did he prepare for that? Or how does he, he didn't know that was going to happen, but how does he think God prepared him for that time, which he talks about as one of the maybe the highlight of his walk with God, that time in captivity. So, yeah, enjoy. Bye for now.